Garden.
All right, welcome to Torture Garden. I'm Jimmy,
I'm Scott.
and so when we came together to talk about what we were going to do this year, Scott brought up a great idea, which was to talk about
Thanks.
anniversary albums, stuff that's turned like a major number this year. Some of our favorite albums, and so after bothering Scott for I don't know, that was at least a good hour, going over rate your music, and I know you're like, I'm hungry, go away, Jimmy.
So I didn't realize that we were going to do that in
Yeah.
the moment. So
Well,
I'll eat after we record, and then at that point I'm like,
no, you could have just said, Jimmy, shut the fuck up. Like,
well, that's what I was trying to be polite. I was like, are we okay? We can.
do I respond to politeness, Scottford?
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
No, I thought
so.
I thought it was interesting because every year there's always these posts or people make videos depending on the platform about shit like that album's that old or that album came out when, and a lot of times, especially in the metal community, I think Metal Injection usually does this every year or whatever. They don't really dive into them. They usually just have like a list of these albums turn this old, which is cool, but I mean I feel like that's always a good opportunity to talk about it. Especially when it's a milestone, like a 20, 25, and today, 50 years. I mean, it's a moment to kind of sit down and talk about, this album came out, 5 decades ago, or however many decades ago. Like what significance has it had? It's had so much time to impact music, and it was. I think both albums we were gonna talk about today into 2 separate episodes. Really, they were well received then, and then have maintained their longevity after 50 years, which is it's not common, especially today with how many back then it was maybe a little bit more understandable because of there were many fewer albums being released than there are today.
But now it's like, just what with Bandcamp and the like, it's just like there's so much stuff, and I
Which
mean,
isn't terrible, but
I think it's a good thing. It definitely has its negatives, which we should talk about that sometime. But
the pros and cons of how much.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, but I think it's it's a good thing, but. Nonetheless, this is an album which we haven't even said it. Aretha Franklin's "Lady Soul."
Dancing around.
Yeah, I know. So Aretha Franklin's "Lady Soul" came out in 1968, January 22nd. We're just a note to people if anybody's going to be like, oh, why didn't you get the exact date? It's because we have lives outside this.
Yeah, we sometimes do things.
Yeah, and I figure if we can just get within the month,
exactly.
I figure that's good enough. I think that these albums are worth talking about no matter the year. But I think instead of trying to like fight over like oh, we'll do this instead of this, let's just find whatever turns whatever this year.
Exactly.
So just go by the big numbers, make it easy. So. Anyway, Aretha Franklin is, one of...
Is Aretha Franklin.
Yeah, probably, I can only think of, like, a few other, singers that might be as legendary as her.
In terms of, like,
Billie
female
Holiday,
powerhouse singers.
Yeah, Ella Fitzgerald. It's... I guess Beyonce, even though I really don't want to compare Aretha Franklin to Beyonce.
But in terms of star power, it really takes someone like a Mariah Carey or a Beyonce to really hit the same level of cultural significance as Aretha Franklin. And
exactly. She's still going on tour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she sang inauguration at the inauguration of Obama and stuff. She's still a person who's maintained her respect in not only just the music community but just the general American culture. She made such an impact with some incredible songs, and also just her voice. Obviously, that's one of the main things that set her on the map. Is just she's an incredible singer, and she still has it, which is really difficult. Obviously, not to the degree she had in the past, but still, she still has phenomenal singing voice.
But I think when we talk about good singers, I think there's a lot that makes up a unique voice. I mean, we can look at someone like Shoo Shoo, like Jamie Stewart,
Yep.
whose voice is, on a technical level, not very good, but is so distinctive and matches his music so well that,
Exactly.
it becomes something much more than it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have, on the other hand, though, we could have somebody that, I really can't think of anybody at the moment who has amazing technical ability, but little to no personality for that voice.
I have a good example. I mean,
All right.
I won't spend too much time on it, but I think Taylor Swift is obviously a technically good singer. I think she's actually would probably be considered, a very talented singer. I don't like the personality in her voice, and I don't think it's particularly special.
Yeah,
I would prefer some of the singers we mentioned before, like Jamie Stewart or whatever, just as an example, not specifically them, but people who don't necessarily have a great voice, but they're just entertaining and they have a lot more personality, and it's a lot more interesting to listen to.
Exactly.
It's kind of like you get that Disney effect where, yes, these are great singers and they sound right on par and right on with the technicality of what song they're trying to sing, but it's just not interesting. It sounds too clean. There's not personality or whatever.
Yeah. That's definitely a big part of like the Disney teen generation thing. I mean, I immediately when you said Taylor Swift, I'm like, oh yeah, Miley Cyrus.
Yeah. Oh, Miley Cyrus is another great example. Where her singing voice is good, but like just not. Whatever.
It's just there's no not to be all punny, but there's no soul behind it.
There's no soul behind it. And I think I think we're to agree with this, but all that to say that Aretha kind of has both. At least for me,
Aretha definitely has both.
She definitely has both.
I think on top of having a very distinct tone in her voice, she has this technical ability that is just insane. That and I think both of those are able to combine so well to make her just such a distinct voice out of this, because I think if you took her away from the the production of this album and the music behind it, and put in someone else, it would not have the same power.
No.
And not to say that these songs are bad by any means. I like a lot of these songs, but it's very much similar to what to what like Motown was doing at the time, and the like. So when it comes to soul, it's really not that different. Like Sharon Jones put out like a posthumous album last year that sounded eerily similar to this. So it's not like this is some huge breakthrough on like a sonic level, at least on a musical level. But I think it's Aretha's voice that ties everything together. And I think more than that, though, I really like how her, how the lyrics, even though I'm pretty sure she didn't write any of them.
I don't think so.
I like how they managed to have this power because she's singing them. Like it reminds me a lot of Elvis in a way, because
absolutely,
she's, because I think it's I like to call it like a sort of like a natural talent, like Elvis, his songwriting credits are only because of like management. They did it so you could get a little more money out of what he was doing. But when it comes to his voice, it's his voice that really counts. And I think here it's Aretha's voice that really counts. But Scott,
fun little interjection just quickly.
Yeah.
Back in elementary school, I one of the first CDs my parents ever gave me was Elvis's Greatest Hits. And nice. I played that thing every day on the way to school on my CD player. And we had to do a unit in, I think, like 4th or 5th grade, where we had to do a project on a composer. And I was like, I'm going to do Elvis. And I had to, my music teacher, he could tell, like, I loved Elvis. He had to have an awkward conversation where he's like, well, Elvis didn't write, like, any episode of music. So, and I was crushed. Because obviously, that kind of cheapened, or for me, it cheapened it a little bit, that I thought this guy, he wrote everything and he sang everything, he was this mastermind. And then I was like, oh, But I mean, obviously, he's still great. It just
I
always think back to that when I find out someone didn't actually write their own music. That moment where I was just crushed that like this. I loved Elvis so much. I'm like, oh, he's actually not as great as.
Well, to go back to an earlier conversation of ours, like hip hop is very much in the same boat.
Exactly.
They just because Danny Brown made an awesome album, just because Atrocity Exhibition is great doesn't mean that it's entirely his album.
Exactly. No, that's a great point.
So,
but kind of like with what we're talking about with Elvis and Aretha Franklin, who know we'd be comparing them to Danny Brown.
Yeah.
But like, especially on Atrocity Exhibition, some of the other beats he raps over, I mean, those are very non-conventional beats.
Oh yeah.
Rapping over the way he's able to do it in such a unique way that makes it work so well. And kind of on the flip side is with someone like Elvis or Aretha, on this album, a lot of these songs, are, classics within soul and Motown and whatnot. And in this type, easy listening, Motown, soul, kind of that blues, rock and roll, like all those songs that are kind of standards, they kind of fall into this effect where they feel like standards. Like, kind of like, no matter who's performing them, you're like, okay, well, it's this song, whatever. There's some exceptions, I think. Frank Sinatra had a distinct voice where he could do that, and Tony Bennett to a degree. But even then...
I was just saying, if you want to go into jazz, too, like, there are some jazz standards that are, like, anybody else plays them, and they sort of don't really have that same pop to them.
Exactly.
I get you.
But I think with Aretha, what I found on this is not only the way she was able to bring so much personality and so much conviction to these lyrics and the way she was singing, but they felt, with kind of what makes these standards feel like standards is you have basically just, slap in the music and then this singer who's popular right now goes on top. It felt like this was Aretha's, at least to me, like this was Aretha's band. Like she was performing with them, and it was just in the moment, and it wasn't just they threw in these session musicians or put Aretha in, which is probably what happened, honestly. But it felt like this is a band that Aretha's been performing with forever, and that they're going for it and they're giving it their all. And I mean, obviously, I knew that this is a great album. It's very revered. I knew I'd like it because I like a lot of these songs and I've heard them before. But
this was your first time listening to?
This is my first time listening to this in full. I mean, I've heard many of these songs. And actually, I was reminded. I was like, oh yeah, I know that song. I've heard that before. This is my first time listening to this album in full, and I was shocked at just how much of a complete actual album it felt like. It didn't feel like a lot of times older albums just felt like a bunch of 45s slapped together into, all right, let's just make an LP. This felt like something that was actually written, even though everything I'm saying kind of isn't exactly what happens. Obviously, these probably were session musicians for the most part. Many of them probably were not anyone she performed with like at length. And she didn't write any of these songs or whatever. But
I guess she did play piano. But there's a lot of stuff going on, but nonetheless, just giving that little shout out.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess just suffice to say that I think this is an incredible album. I didn't expect to enjoy this as much as I did on a full listen, but there are just so many fantastic songs in here back to back. Even the songs that I didn't know or haven't gone to go classic canon are still phenomenal. And I was a big fan of this, and I'm glad you shouted out because, like I said, when you think albums, you really mainly you think the 70s is when like the album really started as a format. Obviously, there were albums before that, but the great albums in time,
the 60s.
Other than some key ones in the 60s, I think for me, and this is probably just a personal bias. I don't think as much to the 60s and earlier, but there are some great albums, and this is a great example of a fantastic album that is 50 years old and still sounds timeless. I mean, there's a reason these songs become classics and become a part of American culture, is because they have such a great composition, and they're really aged incredibly well because they're just written so well, they're performed so well, and so anyway,
I'm definitely with you.
My few thoughts on it.
Yeah, no,
what do you think,
I'm definitely. I thought this was cool that this is your first time listening. Well, listening to it in full.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is actually one of my favorite albums ever. Like, I will not even lie about it because I just like whenever like, so I have to walk to school, and it's East Coast. The weather is nuts sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
So like there were days that it was like rainy, and just like this was like my rainy day. This was my rainy day album. This is like Faith No More, basically, which is sort of weird pairing.
That's
but
very interesting.
Nonetheless, yeah, like just this is like one of these albums I'll put down. Like if I'm sad, like this is like my happy album.
Yeah.
It's just because like Aretha's like I look at the first track, Chain of Fools, on just very indicative of everything Aretha Franklin's about, because I think when you think about the lyrics, even though again she didn't write them, I think she nonetheless represents them very well.
For sure.
And I think that she's, even though this isn't on this album, this is on a later album, but like, Respect, like, she has this embodiment of just empowerment that I really like, that, it sort of goes beyond the political, that it's not about, the patriarchy, this, or, what have you. It's just like, I'm not going to take this anymore, and this is just how it is.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And I love that. I respect that so much. Mm-hmm. And just, it only becomes magnified when you hear certain parts of Chain of Fools. Just like, there's that break where, my father says, "Come on home." My doctor says, "Take it easy." Like, and like the way she does the phrasing on that "easy" is just like heart melting for me. Like I just I could probably just put that on repeat over and over again, just like that 5 seconds, and I would still be happy. Because I just like the way she's able to just manipulate her voice like that is just absolutely beautiful. And I can't say that every song on here is like an absolute hit or something that I love. Like, it's not to say I dislike any of it, but I think some hit harder than others. Like, some are much more memorable than others. Like, People Get Ready, Chain of Fools, like basically the first half of this album, including like You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, like for sure. It's that, like, they have a lot more memory to them than like the second half. So it's not like this album is without its faults, but I think those faults are more like it's more like those little parts that pale in comparison to the greater parts.
Exactly.
I absolutely, I'm like just completely in love with this album, and I don't even know what else to say. Just because I just, it sort of hits all the right spots for me. I really like the, I like the instrumentation too, because I think, this was sort of a, like, I think soul and like, R&B can sort of go either way. Sometimes it can get like just cheesy.
Yeah. Oh,
and
absolutely.
Then other times, I think like it just sounds artificial. And, I think this is a nice little balance that, like, the way, like all these horns that she has playing, and just sort of the way it's all arranged, I just found to be very, very inviting, and just, it's not like this is, I mean, should go without saying, this is not an album that you're going to have to put on over and over again to like get, this is something that's just so enjoyable from the start, that you got to give it credit. And I think I not to go on a little tangent, but like I think with art we tend to view cerebralness and like difficulty as good things, which if you ever looked at the things I've read, I very much like difficult stuff and difficult stuff to listen to, but that doesn't always mean that it's good, and it doesn't mean that simplicity is bad. Because, like, all of these are very simple songs when it comes to, just their structure and just arrangement, not necessarily the way they were performed, because that's I think Aretha's sort of on her own when it comes to singing, but like it's nonetheless enjoyable, and I think it's enjoyable more than just drinking and getting that buzz. Like it's even more than surface level. It's something that even when you dig down, into the heart of the song, it's still there's just like there's a lot of heart there, and I really appreciate that that it's pop music that even though I think it's pretty obvious that it's pretty corporative when it comes to because I mean we're talking about a time where it was you're either listening to like this jazz or rock, which is like still in this weird place that like you have the Beatles doing really well, but then like a lot of the stuff that proves to be hugely influential aside from the Beatles is like underground.
Yep.
Like much like our next album that we'll be talking about.
Yeah.
But like this is for a corporatized album that has a lot of people thinking about what's going on, this thing like just focus group to hell, I think it does a really good job of holding up nonetheless. I think it's just a great example of just saying that I don't think art like you can't really put a slap a definition on what defines good art, because there's always an exception to the rule, it seems, and I mean this is a subject I've always been thinking of, like just for years and years, and I still have yet to come to a definitive answer, because I just don't think there is one. It's just, and I think this album's a great example of that, just saying sometimes you can find a lot of heart in the little things in life.
Absolutely.
That's this is very much a comfort album for me, so it's hard to get some distance from it and look at it a little more objectively, but I really don't see anything like super wrong about it. Like I just some tracks are weaker than others, but I mean, like you've still got one of the greatest voices of the 20th century, on here. So like even if it's like even the song itself is a little mediocre, you've still got a great performer in it, and it's just super enjoyable. But I think maybe it's worth talking about just for a couple more minutes, just about how influential and important it is, because I don't think like we remember Motown, we remember old R&B, but I feel like it doesn't have like this positive place in the zeitgeist, like because it almost feels like a little like exploitive, like a little like I don't know how to describe it. Like it just I think we look back at Motown and it maybe it feels a little cheesy. And we don't really have a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, that was a great album." Like we very I don't know, like when we think about when people think about good R&B, I think most people would say something like Beyonce, which nothing against Beyonce, but to say that she's indicative of all R&B would be wrong, or just pop in general. And so this thing this thing wasn't laying any roots, but it solidified a lot of things. I think it did what it did very well.
Yeah, for sure.
I think in the 50 years since, it's just been amazing to see where the genre's gone. We've had even though Marvin Gaye was obviously around and active during this time, he still took this sort of sound and still kept improving on it, and you're getting a little stranger and stranger until you've got sexual healing going on, and then his untimely death, but and then to even go from there to the 90s, where it starts getting sort of mixed in more with hip hop. You've got someone like Lauryn Hill, putting all these genres together. it's just very really cool to see that this is sort of like a landmark of this time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. You have anything else to put in? I feel like I've been talking for like 10 minutes straight now.
You made a lot of great points that I don't really have much more to add. I would say, I think we often do. I don't know if we necessarily that experimentation is a virtue, but we do kind of view experimental as almost a selling point, or as kind of you should check it out as experimental or whatnot.
Well, I personally wouldn't use the term experimental, just because I think stuff that's difficult and cerebral isn't always experimental.
Sure.
Like, I like Radiohead, for example. Like I like Radiohead, but like, when it comes to, them being like an experimental band, they are very much not on that spectrum as much. Like they're very close to more like they're more like a rock band that has tendencies that veer into like the left field rather than being like an experimental band.
Yeah.
So like I think it speaks more than experimentalism and like avant-garde tendencies. It's more like people think that if something has like this underlying philosophy, or what we consider deep, that it's that it's like objectively better because of that.
And that's what I was speaking to, is that we often think like that's a selling point, but it's really not a virtue onto itself. I mean, there's a lot of, even if it's not full out experimental or just kind of more forward thinking, or whatever you want to call it, there's some music that is just not good, even if it does go down that path. So just because something isn't, like you said, this album wasn't groundbreaking or experimental to really any degree, but it's well written. And at the end of the day, whether it's an avant-garde album or kind of slightly out there or very, very standard, what really matters is how the songs are written. Is it
exactly
and
performed? Is
it well written? Is it well performed? And I think both those points are just epitomized by
definitely
by Aretha Franklin's performance and the arrangements here. And this is, everyone's heard songs like Chain of Fools and Natural Woman, obviously. I think, like me, if you've never heard this before, give it a listen, because you'll be surprised at how often you've heard these songs, how much these songs are really in popular culture or just in general.
Just deeply ingrained in the public eye.
Like especially, I mean, obviously, all the singing competition shows or any type of competition shows, like a lot of these songs, kind of like songs like by Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, and Aretha Franklin. Those are songs where when someone's trying to tackle it, like, oh shit, she's trying to sing Aretha, good luck. It's one of those singers where you are more so than many other songs or artists or whatever. You're compared to them, and you're held up to the standard they left, because she has such an amazing amount of technicality and power and strength, and it's phenomenal to think that she's had such longevity in terms of not only being able to sing or perform this late in her career. I mean, I don't even know how old she is. I mean, she's at least in her 70s, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah,
75. Yeah.
I love when we say stuff like that, as we both
we immediately go to Wikipedia. Yeah.
We're just like, I wonder how old she is.
Very professional here.
Yeah. Well, I just mean, like, in general, we do that all the time. Like, fact, and she's like holding her phone. It's like, you can just look it up. But yeah, the fact that at 75 she still has it. She's had this longevity as a cultural icon. She can still sing. I really, there isn't much more to say other than this. This is.
I mean, there's a reason they call this soul music. It's because I think it's such a raw expression of not always joy, but it's a raw expression of who we are, and I think that's what art is at its definition. And so I just listening to this album just gets me excited, just because, people are capable of doing this stuff, that, people are able to make the world beautiful like this, even if it's in just such a small, way, it's,
exactly.
This world has been more beautiful because of it, 50 years later. And I respect the hell out of that. So, yeah. All right. Well, this has been Torture Garden. Thanks for listening, guys. And, subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video if you want. We're on iTunes now, and we're also on SoundCloud. But SoundCloud's stupid, and they probably won't let us listen to. You probably won't be able to listen to everything, so listen to it on iTunes because iTunes is better, guys. I'm serious.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Our sponsor being Apple Music.
All right.
Yeah, no, but all right. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Torture Garden.